Hi, my name's Adeline. And when my sister said, Grandpa's walking me down the aisle, our parents didn't cry. They didn't protest. They plotted. 2 decades after erasing us from birthdays, from bedrooms, from every family photo, they thought they could waltz back in, just in time to be seen. But that walk down the aisle? It wasn't just about love. It was about everything they tried to rewrite. Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment. Because this isn't just a wedding story, it's about silence and the people who finally broke it. My name is Adeline, youngest of 3. Technically. I say technically because most days I didn't feel like part of a trio. If you'd walked into our house in Fremont, California, you might have seen 3 kids. But in every room that mattered, every hallway photo frame, every school certificate on the fridge, every birthday banner, I was missing, cropped out by neglect. The day I learned I didn't really count wasn't the day I got punished. It wasn't a scolding or a slap. It was the day I turned 10 and there were balloons in the living room that spelled out, "Happy birthday, Malis and Dorian," nothing else. I stood next to the cake, frosted in pastel blue, thick buttercream letters looping over fondant flowers. "Happy birthday, Malis and Dorian," everyone clapped. Even the neighbors. Someone handed me a plate. I smiled, pretended I hadn't read the icing, pretended my name didn't taste like chalk in my mouth. I remember holding the knife to slice it, the plastic one they always made me use, because they said I was too careless for real utensils. That moment, just me and the knife, and the cake that didn't include me, I felt invisible and dangerous all at once. I didn't cry. I just slipped into the backyard before the singing even began. Nobody noticed. Our house sat at the edge of Fremont's older district, near the railroad line. One of those beige stucco homes with fake brick panels that peeled when it rained too hard. The living room was Mom's domain. White carpet, dusty glass cabinets, plastic-covered sofa nobody was allowed to sit on. Dorian still did. They never scolded him. My room wasn't a room. It was the laundry closet wedged behind the garage door, next to the water heater. I didn't have a door, just a curtain, thick with dryer lint. When Malis turned 10, they gave her a room makeover, painted walls, fairy lights, a canopy bed from some online catalog. Dorian, at 5, had a jungle-themed room with a tiny tent and glow-in-the-dark stars. I had the smell of fabric softener and a bucket that leaked when the machine overflowed. There were no nameplates on my curtain, just a sticker on the washer that read, "Whites Only." I still don't know if it was supposed to be ironic. Malis was older than me by 5 years. And to be fair, she tried. Tried to speak up when Mom forgot to pack me lunch. Tried to sneak me cookies when I was told I didn't need more sugar. But Malis was the bridge between me and the volcano. She couldn't stop the lava, just warn me where it might hit. Dorian, though, he was the prince, born after both of us. The son they always wanted. His birth felt like a parade. I remember the hallway being filled with, "It's a boy." Balloons for days. He got a golden rattle, a sterling silver keepsake box. I got a pair of socks for Christmas. One year they were even used. I wasn't bitter, not at first. Kids don't know they're being neglected. They just assume it's normal, until you realize it's not. That 10th birthday, the one with the cake, I'd helped set up that party. I blew up balloons until my cheeks hurt, carried folding chairs from the garage, wiped down the plastic tablecloths twice when the wind flipped them. I even found Malis's old glitter markers to make a sign. Nobody asked if I wanted a cake. Nobody asked what I wanted for dinner. I remember sitting on the porch swing that night, legs curled under me, picking at the splintered wood. And then, Grandpa showed up. Arlen was my mom's dad. He wasn't invited to most family things. Not because he was trouble, but because he asked too many questions. About why I wasn't in the school play, why my grades didn't make the family group chat, why my name was always missing from cards. That night, he pulled up in his beat-up blue truck. No warning. Just headlights in the dark. Everyone else had gone inside, probably halfway through singing the names that didn't include mine. He walked up with a paper bag in his hand. The kind from the craft store. "Did I miss the party?" he asked, ruffling my hair like I was 5 again. I didn't say anything. He handed me the bag. Inside was a handkerchief, white, soft, and neatly stitched in the corner with a lilac dahlia, the kind you'd only notice if you looked close. "Pretty girls deserve something that lasts," he said. "You may not be on their cake, but you're never off my mind." I looked at him for a long time, trying not to blink. I didn't want to cry. Crying meant I'd have to explain. Explaining made it feel real. That was the first time I felt seen in a way that didn't make me shrink. Now, looking back, it's easy to say the signs were there. That love, or lack of it, leaves clues. That when people leave you out of the little things, they're practicing for the big ones, like birthdays and weddings and wills. But what they forgot is that forgetting a child doesn't erase her memory. That birthday, I didn't cry, I just disappeared, and no one noticed. But someone did, and years later he became the only person I ever truly trusted. I was 16 when Melis and I ran. She was 20 by then, barely out of community college, working nights at a sandwich shop while juggling half-finished classes and full-time exhaustion. I was still in high school, still pretending to care about prom and chemistry homework, still trying to figure out why our family photo in the living room had everyone but me in the center. That night, we didn't pack much. A half-filled backpack between the two of us, 2 granola bars, a sweater I stole from the school's lost and found, Melis's emergency cash rolled in a sock, and the embroidered handkerchief Grandpa Arlen gave me 6 years earlier. We left Sacramento's worn-out edges and boarded the midnight train to Chico. No one knew. No one stopped us. It was cold in the train car, not from the air, but from what we were leaving behind. You'd think escape feels like power, but sometimes it just feels like drifting through space, waiting for something solid to catch you. Melis leaned her head on the window, watching the darkness blur past. "We're gonna figure this out," she whispered, more to herself than me. I didn't say anything. I just clutched the backpack tight and counted the minutes until we reached him. Grandpa Arlen lived on the edge of Chico, just past the last strip mall, in a pale yellow house with chipped shutters and a porch that sagged on one side. It was past 2 a.m. when we knocked. The porch light flickered on. For one terrifying second, I thought he wouldn't recognize us. But then he opened the door in flannel pajama pants and a worn-out t-shirt, blinking in surprise. His eyes widened, not in anger, but worry. "Girls?" he said. "What's going on?" Melis's voice cracked. "We didn't know where else to go." He didn't ask another question. Just stepped aside and let us in. The inside smelled like old cedar and apples. I remember his footsteps padding softly toward the kitchen, the sound of the kettle clicking on, the fridge humming in the background. He set 2 mugs of warm milk on the table, slid a plate of buttered toast between us, and sat down across with a quiet sigh. "Eat," he said gently. "Then sleep. You're safe here." That word, safe. It was the first time I'd heard it without flinching. We didn't say much that night, just sat there, sipped, listened to the ticking clock on the microwave. Melis's hand found mine under the table, and for the first time in years, I didn't pull away. When I went to bed, his guest room, warm with actual sheets and a lamp that worked, I looked at the ceiling fan spinning above me and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't. Morning came with the sound of eggs cracking and bacon sizzling. It smelled like normal, like a life that wasn't dictated by who spoke first or who needed to disappear. I was brushing my teeth in the hallway bathroom when I heard it. Tires on gravel. Then the front door slammed open. "Where are they?" Mom's voice, ice cold, furious. She didn't knock, didn't even pause. Melis stepped out of the kitchen holding a spatula, stunned. I could hear Grandpa's chair scrape across the floor, fast and sharp. He met them in the living room. Vera and Calder stood like storm clouds, Dad's arms crossed, Mom's face flushed. "You're hiding our daughters now?" Vera snapped. Grandpa didn't blink. "They're not hiding, they're resting." Calder took a step forward. You don't get to keep them like pets, Arlen. We gave them a roof. We fed them. You controlled them, Grandpa snapped. His voice, usually slow, patient, cut like a whip. You don't own your children, Calder. They're not property, Vera hissed. They're minors. They belong at home. No, Grandpa said, loud enough to shake the room. They belong somewhere they're not punished for existing. My toothbrush was still in my hand, dripping onto the floor. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the man I only knew as kind and quiet, now roaring like a lion in his own house. Calder growled back, "You're poisoning them against us." "You did that yourselves," Grandpa said, "and if you try to drag them back like this again, I swear on my wife's grave, I'll call Child Protective Services. You want a case? I'll give them one." Silence. Dead, seething silence. Vera looked at him, then at Melis, and finally at me standing halfway down the hallway. Her lip curled, not in sadness but insult. "Ungrateful," she muttered. "You both are." They left without another word. The door slammed behind them like a closing casket. The quiet afterward was heavier than the yelling. Melis sat back down, her hands shaking. Grandpa looked at us, then rubbed the back of his neck. "You girls want to talk about it?" We didn't. But we sat there for hours, ate cold eggs, replayed old hurts without saying them out loud. I think he understood anyway. I watched him that afternoon, sweeping the porch, humming an old tune, and I realized something I hadn't known before. Adults could protect you. I just hadn't met one who would. That night, I started journaling. In an old notebook Melis had in her backpack, page after page, I wrote one sentence. "He yelled for us." That became my lifeline, my secret weapon, my reminder that once, just once, someone stood between me and the storm. We stayed with him for a week. Then the school board stepped in. Technicalities, jurisdiction. We had to return home if we wanted to stay enrolled in our district. Melis couldn't afford to quit work. I was 2 semesters from graduation. We went back. We had no choice. But something stayed behind. That house. That voice. That moment when Grandpa drew a line in the carpet and dared our parents to cross it, it stayed inside me. I knew the system wouldn't save me. But now I knew something else. Silence wasn't the only shield. Belief could be one too, but belief only goes so far. Because when I reached for freedom again, someone tried to erase even that. It started with an email, and it almost cost me my future. I was 18 when I mailed my college applications from the school library during lunch, with Melis standing guard by the door. It had to be secret. Everything had to be a secret. At home, college was for men. Dad made that very clear every time he opened his mouth. "Education doesn't raise babies," he said once while staring straight through me. "A woman's future is in her home, not in a lecture hall." I had learned to nod, to stir the soup pot, to disappear. But inside that disappearance, I'd built something, quietly, brick by brick. And one afternoon, I opened a letter that told me it was real. It was folded in thirds, standard envelope. I was standing outside the mailbox near our street, hands trembling. The front said, "Reed Lake College of the Arts, Office of Admissions." I opened it sitting on the curb like a child holding her first secret. "Dear Ms. Odalyn Marin, we are pleased to offer you a partial scholarship for the fall semester." I didn't read the rest. I pressed the letter to my chest and felt the whole street blur. That night I didn't sleep, not out of fear, but planning. Every step had to be clean, quiet, undeniable, and so 3 days before move-in, I left. Melis had created the distraction. She convinced Mom to go with her to a hair appointment and kept Dad busy in the garage. I packed what I could into a single duffel, folded the letter on top, and left a note on the kitchen counter. I didn't cry. The note said, "I'm not running from you, I'm running toward myself. Don't wait up." I caught the 5:45 p.m. Greyhound out of Sacramento. My legs buzzed the whole ride. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was movement. When I stepped onto the Oregon campus, something cracked open in me. Nobody knew me. Nobody whispered about my name. Nobody looked at me like I owed them obedience. I breathed in air that didn't taste like mildew and judgment. Orientation was awkward. I stayed in the back of the welcome sessions, said very little, smiled too often. But it was the first time I had ever felt invisible by choice, not punishment. Until the email came. It was 2 weeks into classes. I was walking back from a poetry workshop when the subject line popped up on my phone. Ari, admissions verification, urgent. I stopped cold in the middle of the sidewalk. Inside, the message was short. Dear Odilon, we received a second email following your application. It alleged inconsistencies in your recommendation letter and concerns regarding your emotional stability. We are not accusing you of wrongdoing, but need to verify the legitimacy of your documents. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Assistant Director of Admissions attached was a copy of the forwarded message. It read, I'm writing because I'm worried about your decision. Odilon Marin has a history of unstable behavior. Her recommendation letter is suspicious. Please check its source. I can't in good faith stay silent. Concerned parent. No name, no signature, just a header. I clicked details and saw it, an IP address. Familiar. My stomach twisted. My hands were shaking. I ran back to the dorm and sat in front of my laptop. I pulled up the original recommendation from my high school counselor, Mrs. Delaney. I emailed her immediately. She replied within the hour. Absolutely not. I wrote your letter personally. I'd stake my license on it. I forwarded her email to the admissions team. It took 2 more days, 2 full days where I couldn't breathe fully. 2 days of checking my inbox every 15 minutes and trying to pretend I wasn't afraid. When they cleared me, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I created a folder in my email labeled Receipts. I dragged the message and the trace data into it. Then I whispered, not yet, but someday. By October, I had settled into a rhythm. I worked weekend shifts at a used bookstore downtown. The owner, a retired English teacher named Miss Lottie, had taken a quiet liking to me. She didn't ask too many questions, just handed me a sandwich at noon and told me to never let anyone rush me. I studied hard, too hard sometimes, afraid that if I slipped even once, everything would unravel. When my first midterm results came back, I stared at the screen, rereading the number, 98%. I hadn't just survived, I had passed. That night, I climbed the stairwell of the dorm, 6 floors up, and sat alone, overlooking the campus lights. I whispered to no one, maybe to the night itself. I exist, whether they like it or not. I sat there until my fingers got cold and my legs went numb, and I thought maybe this was what freedom actually felt like. Not loud, not cinematic, just stillness that nobody could take from you. But the war they started, it wouldn't stop with me. It hit Malis next, and this time, they came straight for her dreams. She had just turned 22, and while I was finishing my final year in Oregon, she called me from a coffee shop in Fremont. Her voice was nervous, but excited. His name's Robert, she said. He writes software for smart thermostats of all things. But Odie, he listens. I flew down the following weekend. We packed her things in cardboard boxes she'd kept hidden under her bed for years. Dad was away on a business trip. Mom was at Bible study. We didn't ask permission. We weren't girls anymore. I rode in the passenger seat of Robert's car while Malis followed in hers. When we pulled up to their shared apartment, just outside San Jose, modest but clean, she exhaled like she hadn't breathed in a decade. Think they'll come looking? She asked, gripping her keys a little too tight. I didn't answer right away, just looked at her. They won't chase what they think they've disowned. But I was wrong. When Vera found out, it was through a cousin's Facebook post, something innocent, a snapshot of Malis and Robert holding hands outside a movie theater. The phone call came at 10:14 p.m. You moved in with a man, without a ring? Vera's voice was thin but slicing. I'm not a teenager, Mom, Malis said, holding the phone an inch from her face. You're living in sin. It's not sin, it's rent. The silence after that was thick with condemnation. Then Calder took the phone. I didn't raise you to be some Freeloader shacked up in someone else's apartment. Melis didn't cry. She just said, "No, you raised me to never question your voice. I'm not living by that anymore." Then she hung up. And just like that, the calls stopped. The texts stopped. For over a year, it was like we didn't exist, except to each other and to Grandpa Arlen, who never stopped dropping off soup and pie like we were still 7 and 5, and someone had scraped our knees again. Life went quiet in a strange, peaceful way. I graduated, took a job as a social worker in Oakland. Melis taught pre-K. We weren't rich, but we were free. Birthdays came. No cards, no calls. Just Grandpa showing up with a pack of paper napkins and a warm laugh. "Still here," he'd wink. "Still remembering." Then, she got engaged. Robert proposed during a trip to Half Moon Bay. There was a ring, not flashy, but real. She called me first. I was crying before she finished the sentence. She was happy. I could hear it in the way her breath caught between syllables. 2 weeks later, the phone rang again. It was Vera. "We're so thrilled. Can't wait to meet the fiancé. Let's set a dinner soon." No apology. No, "we were wrong." Just a reset, like nothing had happened. Like Melis hadn't sobbed herself sick at 21. Like I hadn't written a college essay about being erased. I said nothing when Melis asked if I'd go. Of course I would. We met them at a mid-range Italian place in San Jose. Linen napkins, fake candles, piano music piped through the speakers. Robert was in a blue-collared shirt, polite, hands folded like someone who'd rehearsed. Melis had curled her hair but left off makeup, as if not to give them more than they deserved. I wore black, always my safest armor. They hugged us all like nothing had happened. Vera even complimented Robert's posture. Then came the breadsticks, the passive jabs, the real reason we were there. Calder leaned in, smiling too wide. "We should present a united front at the wedding." Melis blinked. "What kind of front?" Vera sipped her wine. "Just, a sense of family. We wouldn't want anyone thinking you had no parents." The words landed like a slap through velvet gloves. They weren't there to support her. They were there to reclaim her, for show, to stitch their name into the fabric of her future as if it had never been scorched. Melis clenched her jaw. Robert reached under the table and took her hand. I looked at Calder, then Vera, and finally said quietly, "We'll take your thoughts into consideration." They both nodded like that was a win. I paused, then added, "Like you took ours for 20 years. It was quiet after that. They didn't yell. They didn't storm off. They just finished their wine a little faster. We said goodbye at the valet. I hugged Melis a little longer than usual. That night, around 11:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from her. "They're going to hate what I'm about to decide." She didn't even say what the decision was, but I already knew. It started with a dinner. It ended with a line that drew blood. When Melis called to tell me, her voice was flat, but steady. "Grandpa's walking me down the aisle." There was no trembling in her tone, no search for permission. Just a fact stated, like someone setting a glass down on a table after years of having it yanked away. I paused. "You told them?" "I told Mom." Then Calder called. Then silence. I didn't need to ask what that silence meant. 3 days later, Vera reached out. She wanted to host a clarity dinner. Her words, not mine. A chance to realign expectations before things get too far. The location? The family house? The one Melis hadn't stepped into in over 7 years? The one I left without turning back? Still, she said yes. Not for them. For closure. And me? I didn't go to protect her. I went to witness whatever trap they thought they'd laid. That evening, we drove in near silence. Robert dropped us off at the end of the street, sensing the air was heavier than usual. "Call me if anything," he said to Melis before kissing her forehead. The porch light was on when we approached, but the windows remained dim like the house was holding its breath. I glanced at Melis before we stepped in. "Sometimes," I murmured, "you don't walk into a house. You walk into a performance." Inside, Vera greeted us in a lavender sweater set, smile plastered like a mask too tight for her face. Calder stood beside her, arms crossed, nodding like a pastor at a sermon he didn't believe in. We were ushered into the dining room, the same oak table, the same scratch near the leg from when I tripped at 9, and on each place setting, a menu card. Dinner with the bride and groom. No names, just titles, like props in a play they thought they could still direct. Melis's breath caught for a second. I could see it, the small falter in her step. But she sat. So did I. Vera poured wine. "We're thrilled you're including us in this beautiful season of your life." Melis didn't reply. Calder cleared his throat. "We know there's been miscommunication in the past." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the years of silence?" He looked away. Dinner began. Baked chicken, overcooked asparagus, conversation that dripped with false civility. "Will the venue allow for a proper father-daughter entrance?" Vera asked. Melis put down her fork. "Grandpa's walking me down. That's been decided." Vera blinked, smile tightening. Calder leaned forward. "We wouldn't want people to think there's a rift." I looked at him. "There is a rift. You just don't like that it's visible now." That was when I noticed it, on the kitchen counter. A bridal sketch pad, the same floral border Melis had drawn herself. I stood up, walked over, flipped the page. There it was, the exact custom wedding dress sketch Melis submitted to a boutique 6 months ago, her design. But the order confirmation clipped beside it? Vera's name. "For the bride," it read, per her mother's final approval. Melis stood too, joining me silently. "You took my design," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I preserved it," Vera replied. "It's tradition. A mother should help her daughter shine." Calder added, "It's not about control, it's about representation, family image." Melis stepped back, color draining from her face. "You erased my name, from the dress, from the dinner. What's next? My vows?" I felt it boil in my chest, not rage, something older, sharper. I looked Vera in the eye. "You don't get to control this story anymore." She blinked fast, as if the words had been a slap. Then Calder slammed his palm against the table. The wine glass trembled. "We're still your parents, and you will regret disrespecting us like this." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I leaned in, elbows on the wood, looked him dead in the eye. "Keep pushing," I said, "and next time, we won't show up with words." We didn't wait for dessert. We didn't say goodbye. Walking out, I looked back at that house one last time. They thought we'd leave shattered, but we left with fire. And fire makes you do things you once swore you'd never do. For weeks after that dinner, Melis and I didn't speak a word to Vera or Calder. Not a text, not a call, not even a forwarded meme. The air between us and them had been scorched clean. But silence, as I learned early, isn't always peace. Sometimes, it's a pressure cooker. And this one was ticking. Melis spent her evenings curled on my couch with the wedding planner in her lap, flipping pages she barely looked at. Robert tried to cheer her up, brought flowers, played guitar, offered to elope. But she wanted a wedding, not a war, just one day that was hers. "They don't want to be part of my joy," she said one night, wiping her cheek. "They want to rewrite it, just like always." I nodded, my laptop open next to her, redlining guest names on a spreadsheet. That's when Twist S10 landed, like a bomb disguised in cream cardstock. A cousin from Modesto forwarded me an email. "Is this real? I thought you'd already finalized your list." Attached was a PDF. Subject, "Pre-save the date for the wedding of Melis Calder and Robert Jameson. Sent from Vera's address. Signed, with joy and pride, Calder and Vera, parents of the bride." I stared at it, eyes narrowing. I hadn't seen it. Melis definitely hadn't sent it. She was right next to me the night we agreed not to invite half the names on that list. I turned the laptop toward her. Her mouth dropped, then clamped shut. Her hands shook when she called Vera. "Mom, what is this? Why would you send something out without talking to me?" On speakerphone, Vera sounded calm. Too calm. "We just wanted to help. It's not official, just a heads up for extended family." Milas's voice cracked. "But you wrote that you're walking me down the aisle." Vera's reply was a masterpiece in polished guilt. "Sweetheart, you're being ungrateful. We're trying to protect you from embarrassment. People expect tradition, a father, a mother, not whatever that mess at dinner was." There it was, gaslight, wrapped in lace. That night, Milas didn't cry. She just sat quietly, her hands in her lap like a guest at her own life. The next morning, Twist S11 dropped, and this time, it came from someone who never lied to me. Grandpa called just as I was walking out of the grocery store. "Did you know your parents used part of Grandma Eileen's legacy savings to buy Dorian a new car?" I stopped mid-step. "Come again?" "They drained the joint trust account. It was meant for educational support, for the girls," Eileen said. "I checked. It's gone. The same week Dorian posted a new BMW on Facebook." My stomach dropped. Later that night I found the post, Dorian leaning against the car like it was a trophy. Caption, "My parents always knew I was worth the investment." I didn't feel rage, not yet. I felt nothing. Then a cold click inside me. I screenshot the post, saved it in a folder labeled, "For later." Then I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the porch, and stared into the trees behind our apartment. "They stole from her grave," I said out loud, and handed it to him with a bow. I didn't cry. Instead, I began drafting a formal letter, an account of financial misappropriation tied to the Memorial Trust. Not a lawsuit, not yet, just a record. Something that said, "I see you, and I am not looking away anymore." Then I called Milas into the kitchen. We sat at the table with the wedding planner between us. I showed her the new clause I'd added to the venue contract. Calder and Vera Drosnin may attend as guests. They are not to be included in speeches, ceremonial walks, or familial acknowledgments of any kind. This is non-negotiable. She read it slowly, then again, and then she smiled. That night, she fell asleep on my couch again, guest list clutched in her hand like a map to freedom. I leaned down, pulled a blanket over her shoulders, and whispered, "They had every chance to be kind. They chose control, and now we would choose silence, but sharpened. And now we would choose silence, but sharpened." It's funny how silence can look like surrender to the people who don't know what it costs you to hold it. To Vera and Calder, our lack of response was weakness, an open gate, an invitation. But it wasn't. It was a setup. I'd learned that from watching them twist every argument into a performance, loud enough to distract, manipulative enough to confuse. So this time, Milas and I chose quiet. Not because we didn't have anything to say, but because we wanted the next move to be unmistakable. And it came, of course, in the form of optics. Twist S12 hit on a Wednesday morning. I was sipping coffee at my desk, filtering through unread emails when Milas's phone buzzed across the room. She picked it up, read something, and froze. Then, almost mechanically, she handed it to me. It was a message from Calder, not to her, but to Robert. A direct message. On Facebook. "Hi, Robert. I know tensions are high, but I'm writing to you as the man of reason here. I hope you'll understand we're not trying to control Milas. She's been emotionally unbalanced for years, and unfortunately, her sister feeds that instability. We're just trying to save her from public embarrassment. Be the man. Protect her from herself." I looked up. Milas's face was calm, too calm. "What are you going to do?" I asked. She shrugged. "Nothing." But later that evening, when Robert came over, he was already smiling. He tossed his keys in the bowl, leaned against the wall, and said simply, "If that's the way her father talks behind her back, I'm glad I never invited him to speak in front of our guests." That's when Milas told me what Robert had replied. "She knows exactly what she's doing, and if this is how you handle family, then I understand why she wants distance." He didn't just stand beside her, he stood for her. It was the first time I saw her shoulders truly relax in weeks, but peace didn't last long. Twist S13 came the following Sunday. A cousin forwarded me a group chat screenshot from Facebook. The conversation had Vera in it, along with 3 other relatives. Vera had written, "We did everything for those girls, raised them with love, sacrificed so much, and now they're using this wedding to humiliate us. It's heartbreaking. They've been led astray, especially by Odalyn. She's always had a resentment problem." It stung, but I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was the letter. Another cousin, a quieter one, the kind who still sent handwritten birthday cards, emailed me privately. Subject line: "You should see this." Attached was a scanned copy of a letter being circulated among family elders. It was a fabricated timeline of events, claiming Malis had suffered a nervous breakdown years ago, ran away, and that Calder and Vera had rescued her from destructive influences. The implication was clear, that I had harmed my sister, that I'd been the bad seed all along. Malis stood beside me as I read it, her lips pale. "Do we respond?" she asked, voice trembling. I shook my head. "No. We let them keep talking. It makes our silence louder. Because when people lie that much, all you need to do is let the truth walk in without saying a word. So we turned our energy towards something that mattered. The ceremony. Grandpa Arlen arrived 2 weeks early. He didn't ask many questions. He just stepped into the suit store with Robert and me, let them take his measurements, and said softly to the tailor, "I never walked my daughter down the aisle. I'll get it right this time." Later that night, I gave Malis a small white box. She opened it, and inside was the handkerchief Grandpa had given me when I was 10, embroidered with a lilac dahlia in the corner. "I think you should carry it," I said. "You'll carry both of us that way." She didn't cry. She just held it to her chest, nodded once, and whispered, "Thank you." That evening, as they practiced their steps in the backyard, Grandpa holding her arm with quiet dignity, I sat on the porch, notebook in my lap, listening to the rustle of leaves. And as they rehearsed their steps, I rehearsed the silence that would follow. The ceremony was perfect, until they tried to hijack it at the last second. Guests were already seated in white folding chairs, soft strings played from the small orchestra at the back of the garden. Late afternoon light filtered through the oaks, painting everything in a golden hush. I could see Malis just behind the trellis arch, her hands trembling slightly against Grandpa Arlen's arm. His posture was strong, steady, one hand holding her, the other clutching the embroidered handkerchief I hadn't seen in years. And then I saw it. Movement at the far end of the lawn, a clipboard, a woman in black rushing toward me, the wedding planner, young, nervous, in flats too clean for reality, tugged gently on my sleeve. "Hi, are you Odalyn?" she whispered. "Yes," I replied, my gut already twisting. She glanced toward the crowd, lowered her voice further. "We received this just a few minutes ago. Someone handed it to the ushers. It says the bride is unwell and that the parents will be escorting her instead." "What?" She held up a single printed sheet. No signature, no handwriting, just cold Times New Roman. "Due to emotional concerns, Malis Shipley will be escorted by her parents today." I didn't blink. Across the garden, Vera stood with a faint, pleasant smile, as if she'd merely paused for a breeze. Calder was already a few steps closer to the aisle, straightening his jacket, eyes scanning the seated guests like a general before parade. Robert was standing now, his jaw tight, his fists clenched at his sides. The planner stammered, Do I stop them?" "No," I said calmly. I reached for the microphone clipped to the back of the arbor. I walked up, turned to face the crowd, and spoke clearly, so every word would land where it needed to. "My name is Odalyn Shipley. I am the bride's sister. That note was a forgery. This man," I turned to gesture toward Grandpa Arlen, "will be walking her, as he always has." Silence, and not the kind that drifts softly over a garden. This silence struck. Chairs creaked slightly as guests turned. Calder stopped mid-step, his expression freezing as if someone had hit him square in the chest. Vera reached out, touched his elbow. "Just sit down," she murmured, trying to salvage the moment with a whisper and a half-smile. But there was no salvaging that. They turned around, returned to their seats. No one clapped. No one needed to. I walked to Melis and Grandpa, smoothed the handkerchief in his hand, looked at my sister's face, pale but fierce. "You ready?" She nodded, and then they walked. Twist S15 wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It didn't need to. Because as they took that first step, the handkerchief fluttered slightly in Grandpa's hand. White cotton, soft with age, with a single lilac dahlia stitched in the corner. It caught the light, and someone in the front row gasped. "That's Arlen's stitching," a voice whispered. "From years ago." I saw the way a few older relatives looked at each other, brows lifting, recognition washing in. They remembered. They remembered the way Grandpa had always stood quietly in the background, always there but never acknowledged. Until now. The handkerchief said what 20 years of arguments never could. They reached the altar. Grandpa kissed Melis's cheek, held her hand for a breath longer than needed, then stepped aside. And just like that, the ceremony began. Melis and Robert faced each other. The minister began to speak, and I, standing off to the side, didn't cry. Not even once. I wasn't empty. I was full. Of clarity. Of rage distilled into grace. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a correction, because for the first time in our lives, the story wasn't being rewritten by them. It was being written by us. But some people don't learn when they're silent. They scream louder. And so they did. But this time, we didn't respond with anger. We responded with a door that stayed closed. They didn't speak to us at the reception. No surprise there. They left before dinner. Quietly, deliberately, just as the first course was served. A few guests noticed. One asked if they were okay. "They're fine," I answered. "Just not hungry." I watched as Vera tried to catch Robert's attention on her way out. She reached out, fingertips brushing his sleeve. He leaned away just slightly and said, "My wife's waiting." That was it. No drama, no shouting, just closure. Some endings don't arrive with a slam. They arrive with stillness. The next morning, I woke to the smell of strong coffee and the distant sound of a screen door creaking open and shut. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, past the leftover floral arrangements, and stepped onto the back porch. Grandpa was already there, mug in hand, staring out over the garden like he was watching something only he could see. He didn't say good morning. He just nodded at the chair next to him. I sat. A few minutes later, Melis appeared, veil folded in her lap, her eyes still heavy with sleep but softer than I'd seen in years. She sat on the steps in front of us, leaned back into Grandpa's leg like she used to when we were kids. He rested a hand gently on her shoulder and said, "I didn't walk her down the aisle. I walked her home." None of us said anything after that, and we didn't need to. The air didn't beg to be filled. There was nothing to explain or dissect. Some peace speaks louder than noise. Later that afternoon, after most of the guests had left and Melis was curled up inside napping off the whirlwind of the night, my phone buzzed. Dorian. A single text. "I had no idea they did all that. I'm sorry. I hope she's happy." I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood. Not all apologies are invitations. Some are just bookmarks in a chapter you never want to reread. I didn't reply. The next morning, as I was gathering my things in the guest room, I saw it. Folded neatly on the nightstand, sitting atop a stack of unused programs and a small thank you card from Melis, was Grandpa's handkerchief. The lilac dahlia still stitched firm in one corner. The threads were older now, just a little frayed, but the symbol was as clear as ever. It wasn't just cloth, it was proof. That someone, once, had remembered me when no one else did. I didn't tuck it into a drawer this time, I didn't pack it away. I folded it slowly, placed it in the side pocket of my purse, and zipped it shut. Some pain doesn't disappear. It transforms into a reminder, into a line in the sand, into a boundary. That evening, before heading out, I stood one last time at the edge of the lawn where the aisle had stretched out just 24 hours earlier. I closed my eyes and pictured them again. Malis and Grandpa stepping forward with no music, no permission, no apology. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because in that moment, we weren't the daughters they forgot to name. We weren't the girls who got erased from cakes, from rooms, from family albums. We were women who wrote our names in silence and made them echo. Some people are born into love, some carve it from silence. My sister's wedding didn't fix our family, but it corrected the record, and sometimes that's enough. He didn't just walk her down the aisle, he walked her out of the shadows.